Roger, Ralph's son, is going to speak at this time about him. And thank you for doing that.
Thank you all for being here today. Dad would be really pleased, and my family is honored and comforted by your presence. To my family, I'm going to do the best I can at this. Ralph Edwin Davis was born in January of 1929, the year the Great Depression began, in a small town in western Maryland called Pompey Smash, up on Vail Summit. He was the son of John Theodore Davis I and Dorothy Fatkin Davis. He was the fourth of 8 children and was married for 59 years to my mother, Verna Griffith Davis, who was the 6th of 11th children. Talk about your middle child syndrome. Growing up in a large family in a time when the whole country was impoverished, you can imagine that hard work and thriftiness were Dad's core values. I want to show you that his other values were honesty, doing the right thing, and love and devotion to his wife and his family. But first I want to elaborate about the hard work. There's a story that Dad told us about how our ancestors first came down from Nova Scotia. There was a family of Charles Fatkin, ancestor to Dad's mother, and there were 7 in the family, Mom and Dad and 5 kids, and they wanted to come to western Maryland because there was work there mining coal, and they saved up and sold everything and booked passage, and they got out to sea and they weren't far out, and the ship crashed. It wrecked, and Mom and 4 of the children were lost at sea. And Charles Fatkin managed to save one of his boys, Thomas Fatkin, who clung to his back, and they swam and floated till they got rescued. The shipping company took them back to Nova Scotia, and they saved up for a few more years and finally made it to Maryland. And Thomas Fatkin did work in the coal mines, and he worked 12 hours a day, 7 days a week. And in his spare time, he read and studied, and eventually became a school teacher. And he was eventually elected to the Maryland State Legislature. And that's the tradition that my dad was born into. And he kept a tradition. He was a real hard worker. He used to get in trouble with his grandfather, John P.R. Davis, because little Ralph wouldn't leave alone his grandfather's tools. But Dad got some tools of his own, and he built a little shop way out behind his house. And my grandmother, his mom, told me that every night he just wouldn't come into the house, but she had the switch to his lights there in the house, and she'd turn off the lights, and that's when he'd come in. And I hope you saw last night a picture had of Dad with his little brother there sitting on an airplane that Dad had made, and he looks like he must be about 11 or 12. And he made a lot of ingenious things in his shop, and it was through a twist of fate that Dad got his first full-time job. He was there at the house one day, and a mechanic from Sears Roebuck Service came out to the house on a service call, and he came, and he came to fix their automatic washing machine. Well, they didn't have an automatic washing machine. The guy had the wrong address. But when the guy came to the house, nobody answered the front door, so he came around back and found Dad in the shop, and he looked at the shop. He said, "Wow." He said, y'all come on down to Sears and get a job, you know? And so Dad did. And they were real glad they hired him. He was good. The problem, in fact, that they'd been coming out on that washing machine was that it would hippy hop across the floor. And Dad hadn't been there long, he came up with a solution where they would bolt the thing down, and they pushed that solution out to the entire country. And you'd have thought maybe he'd have been president of Sears Roebuck by now, but that was tough times then. But you see, he was not only a hard worker, but he was a man of vision. And one vision he had for his entire life was a dream of flying. You saw how young he was when he made that first airplane. I remember he told me that in his daddy's day, the best pioneering men were the railroad engineers. And he said, but then in his time, it was the airplane pilots. And boy, he wanted to fly. But he never had the resources. But when he was a boy, he joined the Civil Air Patrol. And when Chris and I were little, we'd go out on Sundays, and some people play golf, but we'd go out and sit at Norfolk Airport and watch them take off and land. He loved those airplanes. And when he was up there in the mountains, they'd have these thermals, rising hot air currents, and he'd make gliders, and he'd fly them up there, and they would just fly forever. And in the early 50s, after they moved to Virginia, he started building radio control airplanes. And he had this one big one, and a lot of y'all probably sometimes saw it in his shop as this big yellow one. A lot of people said it was a Piper Cub, but it was called the RC Special. And he built it from plans he found in a magazine in 1954. And when he opened a model airplane hobby shop in the early 70s, he built an updated version of that same plane. And he liked it so much, he tried to track down the original designer of it, a guy named Bill Winters. And he found him, and Winters was so excited that after all these years, he still had a following. And he traveled here to Virginia and hooked up with Dad, and they took the old plane and the new plane, and they went out and flew it one day. And boy, that was just one of the greatest. I think for both of them, that was just a wonderful day. And it was during that time that he became the founding president of the Hampton Roads Radio Control Club. I don't know if any of the Flyers are here today, but I heard yesterday from Jeff Haywood, their current president, that a lot of them still remember him and talk about him from time to time. I ought to tell you how Mom and Dad wound up in Virginia. Dad graduated from Bell High School in Frostburg, Maryland in 1947. And I never knew this until recently, but he was ranked 10th in his class. And he was always busy. I got to get past this. So Mom graduated the next year. Dad always told me that I was smarter than he was. And that was his way of trying to direct me right, but he was the smart one. Mom graduated there in 48, and she was ranked 5th in her class. And they got married the next year in 1949. And times were tough in Western Maryland, and there were the 2 service techs there at Sears, and the boss called them in one day and said, I'm going to have to lay off one of you, so y'all figure out which one will be. And they said, well, let's each go on part-time and split it. And he supplemented that small income he had left by working on a farm, and he didn't get paid in money, he got paid in eggs. And fortunately, about this time, they had a great uncle down here named Carson Hester that ran a radio sales and repair shop. And he called up there, he called Dad and said, they got this new thing coming out down named television. I think it's going to be pretty big, but I need someone to repair those things. So he hired my dad and my dad's older brother, Ted, Johnny's dad, and they both come down here. And Uncle Ted worked out at Virginia Beach for years, Atlantic TV, and Dad wound up with a 50-year career repairing televisions, and he wound up starting his own TV sales and repair business that fed a couple of families and serviced thousands of customers for over 30 years. Dad Dad got his training there from National Radio Institute. He took a correspondence course, but throughout this time, all of his days, Dad didn't have a normal concept of leisure time. So many of you introduced yourselves to me last night as his customers, but what I want you to know, you were his friends. That's where his life was in his work. He spent every waking hour working, creating, and building. He was a masterful machinist on his metal lathe and with his milling machine, and he built the most wonderful train layouts. I don't know if any of y'all have ever been up in his attic, but the whole attic of our house is a big train layout. He built electronic block controls that were just decades ahead of their time. I remember this turntable he made, like goes in a roundhouse. And the ones you could buy, when you turn them, they stop and they're lined up with the track and the train drops off. But he came up with this little solenoid activated indexing mechanism that would lock that sucker right onto the track. Boy, that thing was perfect. That's the way he did everything. I've been driving a car since I was 4 years old because Dad made go-karts for me and Chris. He made a garden tractor out of car parts he got out at the junkyard. These weren't any ordinary go-karts. Mine had a sheet metal bright yellow body and it had a reverse gear in it. I think Chris's had trailers, and because when we got there to start cars, kids would come from all over the neighborhood for their rides, but we were to never let anybody else drive those cars. We were the drivers. That's Dad's way. And he was an excellent carpenter. He made this awesome playhouse for Chris. It had storm windows and fiberglass insulation and electricity, and it was just a little bit better than the house we lived in. And I remember it sat there for years, and then came time to move across to the other side of the yard, and so how you gonna move that thing, Dad? He said, I'll show you. He said, I'll watch them Egyptians build them pyramids. I know how to move a thing. He knew about leverage. There's one story I got to tell you. He used to work for Morris Company, and they're up there where Mario's and Nick's Lounge is now, but he had a TV shop there, and then when the rest of Morris Company moved up there, these guys came with a lift bed truck with this huge safe. I'm talking about a safe that stood this high and this wide. And they got it out there on the back of this lift bed truck, and it was half in the truck and the lift bed wasn't strong enough. And so the thing is tipping and it's about to fall. So you got two guys out there holding up on that safe, and one guy sitting there racing the engine as fast as it'll go to hold that thing up, and they don't know what to do. So Dad goes out there and he takes a minute to think, and he's got this big old about 4x4 or 6x6 timber that he keeps there, I guess just for such stuff. And he goes out there and he props that thing up between the wall and the safe, and then he says, back up that truck. And just as calmly as could be, he found a solution that wasn't the direct thing, but it worked out, and it was great. In the early 80s, Dad began to study computer programming, and he eventually ran his entire business with software that he produced himself. And when I say he created the software, I mean he understood the systems to the lowest level. He's got barcode readers there, and he didn't buy somebody's software to run the barcode readers. He studied on the barcode standard and how to decode it, and he studied on the hardware, and he wrote his own code to run the things. And he was a master builder, but one thing he would have never done is write a speech like this. He was so very practical. There wasn't any BS in him. And no speculation or idle chat. You couldn't even lure him into it. I tried a lot. And so there are some topics you have to do some detective work to figure out where he stood. And one of the questions is, where did he stand with God? And I'll tell you what I know. In 1962, we had the Cuban Missile Crisis. And there wasn't a lot of talk about it. There was just quiet tension. But one morning he went out on the front porch and brought in the morning paper, and it said, Khrushchev blinks. And Dad smiled, and he didn't have a word to say about President Kennedy. Dad just said, somebody up there is looking out for us. And he defined his religion not really with a Bible verse, but with a quotation from Ben Franklin. God helps those who help themselves. But there is a verse from the Bible that exemplifies the way Dad lived his life. It's something that Jesus said. He said, for whatever you have done to the least of these here, you have also done for me. I remember when at Christmas time, Dad would make a list of some of our less fortunate customers, and he'd tell me, load up the truck with TVs we hadn't sold, and go give one to everybody on the list and tell them Merry Christmas. I remember one time he caught a kid shoplifting from his store, and he didn't prosecute. He took the boy aside and lectured him just like he would have done with me and Chris to try to get him on the right path. Don't anybody get any ideas with Mom? This was a boy that he had some respect for to start with. One time he found an employee had been skimming from the cash drawer. And he took her aside and found out her family was on hard times, and he didn't fire her. He arranged for her to get some overtime to get caught up. And more than a few times I heard Dad complain about a bill on service. He'd go to get his car fixed from Tony Balcom, and Tony give him the bill, and Dad complained about that bill. He said, that's not enough, and he'd pay him more money. That's your golden rule. And all of you who knew him knew that he was a perfectionist. I remember he had this big garage in his backyard, and he was building the ceiling, and he hung sheetrock. And he used props to prop it up, and he did the whole thing himself. And this is a huge garage, and he was showing me one place where he'd gotten all the way over to the side, and there's this little gap where the two edges didn't quite line up. And he says, yeah, I'm going to have to take down this whole row and do it all over. And I said, what are you talking about? I said, you're going to put acoustic tile ceiling over it. Nobody will ever see it. And I said, no one will even know. And he said, I'll know. And that's the bottom line of Dad's quiet, private religion. Nothing swept under the rug. You do what's right, whether anybody's looking or not, because in the end, you got to be able to face yourself. And Dad was there in the hospital. We pretty well knew what was coming. He did express a regret that he hadn't sold down the inventory. But you can't fault him for that, because that's that optimism that's in you that says you got to keep on building and going, and you don't give up. But he didn't express any other regrets, because for his whole life he kept the edges lined up perfectly, no matter how many times he had to do it over to get it right. But I have one big regret on his behalf. As good as he was, and as hard as he worked, he deserved every good thing he ever wished for. But he never achieved his lifetime dream of flying. But I hope I'm wrong. I touched Daddy's face in there Sunday, and it looked like him, but he was gone. It wasn't him. He wasn't there. And I'm thinking maybe now at last he can fly. And I hope you'll join me now in my final wishes for my dad. And repeat after me whatever I say. Fly far, Ralph.
Fly far, Ralph.
Fly free, Ralph.
Fly free, Ralph.
Fly forever, Ralph.
Fly forever, Ralph.
Fly forever, Ralph.
Fly forever.
Fly forever, Daddy.